Let us consider this situation from the perspective of fundamental principles. For centuries, we have gazed in admiration at the moon. Poets, romantics, engineers, and explorers. Each of them found something special in it. Ultimately, it is just a large rock in orbit that could be useful for gravity or even for establishing a base for future journeys to Mars. However, we were gravely mistaken. We were deeply misguided in our conclusions, as is often the case in our history. The moon has never belonged to us, and does not belong to us. We searched for signs of extraterrestrial life in the vast expanses of space, while they were right above us. Change began to occur when an object entered our solar system. It was named 3I Atlas. This was the third interstellar visitor we had noticed. The first was Oumuamua, and the scientist Avi Loeb proposed that it could have been a planetary sail. To be honest, his idea sounded strange at the time. But facts are facts. The second visitor, the comet Borisov, was fairly ordinary. However, the third object changed everything. While people on Earth were engaged in disputes, resource divisions, and other not-so-constructive activities, the real story was unfolding above our heads. Astronomers from the Atlas project detected this object. Algorithms analyzed its orbit and indicated an eccentricity that clearly suggested it was an alien from another star system. But the most interesting part is not that. Its trajectory was extremely unusual. It was moving not just fast, at a speed exceeding 150,000 kilometers per hour, but also in a controlled manner. We recorded slight but consistent course corrections. This could not have been the result of gravitational influences from planets or gas ejections. It had no coma. It appeared to be deliberate maneuvers. We directed the James Webb Telescope at it, and what we saw shattered all our notions of astronomical objects. Its surface was composed of material we would expect to find in the core of a planet. Yet it was on the surface of a rock racing through space. It was not tumbling. It was moving smoothly and steadily. This was not just a rock. It was a probe. Avi Loeb's idea that Oumuamua could be an artificial object no longer seemed crazy. It became abundantly clear that 3I Atlas is an artifact. It was not merely passing by. It was purposefully moving toward the Earth-Moon system. And here is where it gets really interesting. When it crossed the orbit of Mars, the Moon reacted. All the seismometers we left on its surface, old, modern, and the new Chinese and American ones, activated simultaneously. These were unusual lunar tremors, not caused by tides or meteorite impacts. We know what such phenomena look like, but this was something else. This was a signal, structured and complex. Our entire model of the Moon as a geologically dead and cooling body crumbled to dust. It turned out to be not what we thought it was. The signals were not coming from the crust or from deep within. The epicenters of the tremors were located at an average depth of approximately from 70 to 100 kilometers beneath the surface and formed a strict geometric grid across the Moon. The strength of the tremors was insignificant, but their nature was absolutely anomalous. Seismic waves continued to propagate when they should have faded in solid rock. They moved both along the surface and deep within, reflecting off some object that caused them to resonate. Sensors recorded harmonic oscillations, as if someone had struck a giant tuning fork. In the flight control centers in Houston, Beijing, and Korolev, there was confusion. Engineers checked the equipment, suspecting a malfunction. However, the data coming from all stations, belonging to different countries and using various technologies, matched down to the microsecond. The Moon vibrated, producing a low, barely perceptible hum that could not be random. This sound exhibited structure, a complex repeating pattern reminiscent of language. At that moment, the scientific community recalled one of the strangest and most uncomfortable facts of the Apollo mission, which had been downplayed for decades, categorized as a curiosity or a misinterpretation. This concerned the event of January 1969, when the Apollo 12 mission concluded. Astronauts Pete Conrad and Alan Bean, having completed their work on the surface, returned to the command module, while the ascent stage of the lunar module was deliberately dropped onto the surface. The impact was equivalent to the explosion of 1 ton of dynamite. Scientists expected to obtain data about the structure of the lunar crust, and they indeed received it. But the result was shocking. Seismometers recorded that after the impact, the moon began to vibrate. These oscillations did not fade within a few minutes, as they did on Earth, where water and loose rocks quickly dampened the waves. The moon rang. It rang like a bell for almost an entire hour. The phrase "rings like a bell," uttered by NASA, became a catchphrase in narrow circles. For most scientists, this was merely evidence that the moon is an extremely dry and solid body. The absence of water and the dense monolithic structures of the crust allowed seismic waves to propagate without attenuation. But for a small group of researchers considered marginal, this became proof of the unimaginable. In 1970, 2 Soviet scientists, Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Shcherbakov, from the Academy of Sciences of the USSR, published an article titled "The Moon, a Creation of Intelligence." They proposed a hypothesis that official science ridiculed but could not definitively refute. Their arguments were simple and perplexing. Low density. The average density of the moon is 3.34 grams per cubic centimeter, while the density of the Earth is 5.51 grams per cubic centimeter. This indicated that the moon might have either a very small iron core or be partially hollow. The strange craters of the moon, even the largest ones, are surprisingly shallow. It is as if meteorites have collided with some super-strong shell beneath a thin layer of regolith, unable to penetrate it. Vasin and Shcherbakov suggested that this could be an armored casing several tens of kilometers thick. Beneath the lunar seas lay mascons, areas with abnormally high gravity, discovered through disturbances in the orbits of satellites. Official science explained them as solidified flows of dense lava. Vasin and Shcherbakov proposed that these formations might not just be clusters of dense rock, but massive mechanisms or elements of a reinforcing structure of an artificial body, the perfect orbit. The moon revolves around the Earth almost in a circular trajectory, which is a rare phenomenon for satellites captured by a planet's gravity. Moreover, it always faces the Earth with one side, and its visible size matches that of the Sun. This creates conditions for perfect solar eclipses, a phenomenon that many astronomers consider a remarkable coincidence. The hypothesis of Vasin and Shcherbakov was as follows. The moon is not a natural satellite, but a gigantic ancient spaceship created by an unknown civilization. Perhaps its core was removed, and the internal space was used as a habitat. The sturdy outer shell was covered with several kilometers of rock and dust for camouflage and protection from meteorites. This ship could have been placed in orbit around the Earth in ancient times, with a mysterious purpose, perhaps as an observation point, a lifeboat, or as some kind of guardian of humanity's cradle. For 10 years, this theory was regarded as pseudo-scientific nonsense. However, when the moon suddenly spoke in response to the approach of a third interstellar object, this nonsense took on disturbing features of reality. New seismic data indicated the presence of some structure beneath the lunar crust, a cavity, and within this cavity, something was awakening. The discovery that the moon might be an artificial object did not just shake science, it destroyed it. All modern astrophysics, geology, and the theory of evolution, based on the notions of the natural origin of the world, collapsed in an instant. The initial reaction of the government was to attempt to conceal the information. Communication with scientific observatories was classified, and data on the seismic activity of the moon was declared a state secret. But in the era of global internet and independent amateur astronomers, keeping such a secret was impossible. Leaks began almost immediately. An anonymous post from an engineer of the European Space Agency appeared on a forum with raw seismograms. A hacked server in Beijing became a source of analytical reports, and satellite images from a private company revealed strange thermal anomalies in the area of the lunar craters. All of this crashed down on a shocked humanity, causing chaos. Financial markets collapsed in a way that had not been seen even during the World Wars. The concept of tangible assets lost its meaning when an artifact the size of an entire continent loomed over people's heads. Scientists who had spent their lives asserting the natural origin of the moon found themselves in the position of medieval theologians who had just been shown Galileo's telescope. They were fiercely attacked in live broadcasts, and their previous work was ridiculed on social media. But most importantly, the question itself changed. It no longer asked, "Are we alone in the universe?" But rather, "Who are they? Our creators or our jailers? And why have they remained silent for thousands of years?" The moon ceased to be just a nighttime light. It became a symbol of the greatest deception or the most mysterious enigma in history. Ancient myths from various cultures, once considered mere poetic allegories, were now perceived as historical chronicles. Legends of times when the moon did not exist, of a great flood that could have been caused by gravitational fluctuations from the placement of a satellite into orbit, and of gods descending from the heavens took on a new ominous meaning. The interstellar visitor, the third one, continued its journey. Its intentions became clear. It was not merely approaching the Earth-Moon system, it was flying toward the moon. This was not a reconnaissance probe, but a key or a messenger, or perhaps one who had come to awaken the sleeping guardian. Seismic activity on the moon was increasing. From a barely audible rumble, it transitioned to clear rhythmic pulses. Analysts working with this data made yet another astonishing discovery. The patterns of the pulses were not random. They represented complex mathematical sequences based on prime numbers and constants, such as pi and the golden ratio. This was not just a signal. It was a message, an attempt to establish contact. And then, from the surface of the moon and from the center of one of the largest mascons in the Sea of Serenity, came a response. Not seismic, but of an electromagnetic nature. A short, powerful, narrowly directed radio signal was sent straight toward the third interstellar object. Humanity, holding its breath, became a witness to the dialogue between two titans, two artifacts of incredible antiquity and power. We were not participants, but merely ants on an arena where gladiators were about to clash. What does it mean to be human? If all our history, all our evolution, perhaps unfolded under the watchful gaze of a giant observer hovering above us, what if our planet is not a cradle but a sanctuary, or even more terrifying, a laboratory? These questions paralyzed human society. A new era began, the era of the post-settler. Old geopolitical conflicts seemed like childish antics. All earthly resources were thrown into one task: to understand what was happening. Space agencies, which had been competing with each other just yesterday, united in a single project. New telescopes, hundreds of times more powerful than the most advanced known, were constructed in record time. Manned missions to the moon were being prepared, but now their goal was not just to collect samples, but to attempt to penetrate inside and find an entrance to this giant sarcophagus. The hypothesis of a hollow moon became the central scientific theory, and scientists were reviewing data from previous missions. It turned out that astronauts had recorded strange magnetic anomalies and discovered processed metals in soil samples, but this data had previously been dismissed as instrument errors or contamination. Now it was clear. These were traces, crumbs left by those who built this world. Meanwhile, a third interstellar object, having received a response signal, began to slow down. Its deceleration was as inexplicable as its previous acceleration. It was not emitting jets of energy. It created the impression that it was interacting with the very fabric of space and time, dissipating its immense kinetic energy. Its target was not just the moon, but the Lagrange point L1 in the Earth-Moon system, the perfect location for stationary observation, where the gravitational forces of the Earth and the Moon balance each other. Humanity found itself on the brink of an existential crisis. We stand on the threshold of the greatest discovery in our history. But this discovery could turn into our end. If the Moon is a guardian, then from whom or what is it protecting us? Is the appearance of the third interstellar object a signal that the threat for which this guardian was created is approaching? Or does the Moon itself represent a prison? The third interstellar object is the key that may unlock it, releasing something that has been trapped here for centuries. The collapse of the scientific paradigm was just the first push. A much deeper and more destructive earthquake shook the foundations of faith. Religious institutions, which for thousands of years have offered answers to the fundamental questions of existence, found themselves on the brink of collapse. As a result, after weeks of silence and prayer, one of the high-ranking clergy delivered a historic address. He spoke of the infinity of God's creation and that humanity should never have considered itself the only children of the Lord. He quoted Thomas Aquinas, who allowed for the possibility of other worlds, urging the congregation to see this not as a threat, but as the greatest affirmation of the Creator's omnipotence. However, his words split the church. Conservative cardinals and millions of believers around the world condemned him as a heretic. For them, the Moon, awakened and speaking in the language of mathematics, was not a creation of God, but the greatest trick of the devil, described in the revelation of John the theologian. Preachers emerged, calling the Moon the Babylonian harlot of the heavens, and the third interstellar object, the beast from the abyss. Persecutions of scientists began worldwide, who were accused of colluding with the devil. In the Islamic world, the reaction was no less tumultuous. Leading theologians cited verses from the Quran that refer to God as the Lord of the worlds, in the plural. This was interpreted as evidence of the existence of other forms of life. For many Muslims, this became a sign of the incomprehensible greatness of Allah. However, even here, radical factions proclaimed a different viewpoint. They saw in the speaking moon powerful jinn trapped in the celestial sphere, and in the third interstellar object, a portent of the Day of Judgment. New jihadist groups emerged, declaring war not on the infidels, but on a cosmic threat, calling for the destruction of telescopes and observatories as the eyes of the devil. Judaism, with its long tradition of theological discussions, plunged into deep contemplation. Is humanity still the chosen people? If the creators of the moon truly exist, do they fall under the laws of the Torah? Questions multiplied, but answers remained elusive. Perhaps the most philosophically calm reaction came from the Buddhist world. The concept of multiple inhabited planets and cycles of creation and destruction has always held an important place in their cosmology. The Dalai Lama, in his address, noted that this event is merely an opportunity to expand our compassion for all living beings, regardless of their location. It also serves as a powerful reminder of the impermanence of everything, including our knowledge and beliefs. However, on the ruins of old beliefs, like poisonous mushrooms after rain, new ideas began to sprout, giving rise to followers of the moon. A cult that deifies the moon as the great mother, creator, and protector conducted its rituals at night under the light of the awakened deity, and often these ceremonies ended in mass suicides in hopes of ascension. They were opposed by the cult of the Key, adepts of the third interstellar saga known as Atlas, who viewed interstellar objects as their mission to liberate humanity from the oppression of the lunar guardian, whom they perceived as a jailer. The clash between these new religions and the remnants of the old became a daily occurrence. One thing became clear. The history of humanity as we knew it had come to an end. We were no longer the lonely children of the cosmos, curiously gazing at the stars. We had become tenants in a foreign house that suddenly began to show signs of life. Our quiet, poetic companion, the silver disk in the night sky, turned out to be something more. It was ancient, powerful, and utterly incomprehensible. The conclusion of this story has yet to be written. The third interstellar object will hover in its position at the L1 point in a few months. What happens next is known to no one. Perhaps we will receive answers to all our questions. Maybe we will witness an event that will forever change the solar system. Or perhaps it will be the sound of the lunar bell. Not a signal of awakening, but a funeral toll for humanity, which realized too late that its cozy world was merely a backdrop in a grand cosmic spectacle. We looked at the moon, and all this time it was looking back at us. And now it has awakened,